Welcome to Year of Connection, a year-long journey toward becoming whole self-connected. I'm your host, Pauline Shu. We live in an age of mass media. Between the visual stimulation and near constant noise from TV, radio apps, and other media, we are practically swimming in information 24/7. But most of the input we're getting is neither detailed nor particularly scholarly, and yet do you find yourself forming strong opinions based on only these broad proclamations or generalizations? Sometimes it is difficult to recognize it, even if we're doing exactly that. The problem is that using these small snippets of information as the sum of your education on important, life-changing, and often very emotional topics is that this approach debases the efforts we put in to be our best selves. Taking headlines at face value and turning them into life philosophies feeds the tendency to see only a small portion of something complicated. When we do that, we can really miss out on something potentially life-changingly beautiful. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what it means to be educated about a topic, as well as where our responsibilities lie when it comes to feeling, knowing, and truly understanding. We live in a fast-paced world. Information comes at us constantly through various media sources. Between streaming, real-time, real-world, and on-demand, we are inundated with snippets of stories that often provide only a very high-level, glossed-over version of the truth. And yet we increasingly use our emotional reactions to these sound bites in place of in-depth knowledge. We often think ourselves experts on a headline's worth of news that tugs strongly at our emotions without spending comparable mental effort on deciphering the details, the facts, of what we read or watch. As a result, more and more, it's also possible to find ourselves sneering at or thinking ourselves better than things or people we don't actually understand at all. When we think that way, making snap judgments on topics about which we've only read a paragraph or two, our behavior deepens the divide between those we feel or perceive to be like us and those who don't pass muster at first superficial glance. It can lead us to mock things we don't understand, to have contempt for the other, no matter whether that other is a thing, a person, a situation, a place. It's destructive. As I mentioned in episode 11, I've rarely seen a case where a relationship recovers from feelings of contempt. And whether we like it or not, our relationship with the rest of the world is one that we have to nurture and uphold, just like our individual, personal relationships. What I'm encouraging everyone toward is a greater sense of humility and kindness. So, what is an example of what it means to mock things we don't understand? Maybe not surprisingly, I'm going to share an example from my own behavior. Last year, I was watching a documentary about chickens. Now, I love chickens, and I make fun of myself for my obsession with the little feathered things, but my backyard flock doesn't even come close to inspiring the level of devotion that the people in this documentary had. I found the entire show fascinating, and yet I also admit to judging the chicken owners for their extreme love of chickens. But more fool me. I was about half an hour into the documentary and was thinking some pretty snide things when the storyline shifted. Suddenly, the backstories of each featured chicken owner were shared. One woman had found her saving grace from alcoholism by raising chickens. Another man got his escape from the horrors of bullying by doing chicken shows with his dad. And when those stories were shared, and I became better educated about what I was watching and who I was seeing, it made me feel ridiculous for making fun of something that I hadn't really understood. What those vignettes revealed, and then what the rest of the documentary showed me, was that each of these people had a connection to something important. Joy of life. And joy of life is a magnet for connection because it represents a solid, positive connection to oneself that is incredibly appealing. I still don't really understand much about the world of competitive chicken shows, but one thing that clicked for me that day was that if someone gave me only a high-level half hour's worth of summary on every topic that I could imagine, and I used that as my bedrock of knowledge for evaluating the rest of the world, I'd more than likely be a total jerk and a disconnected fool. To be truly knowledgeable, to be an expert, in a nutshell, about most topics requires years of investment. To live the experience, to study the experience, to discuss and document the experience. It does not mean not having an emotional reaction to the experience. It does not mean putting our emotions aside when we are trying to form our belief systems. And I'm not going to say that you must be an expert about anything in order to talk about it at all. Discussion is a part of learning. But I'm going to throw it out there to say that until you reach expert status, you're still a student and should think and speak accordingly. I am still a student when it comes to life. Certainly I am when it comes to raising chickens. Therefore, I can't allow myself to think I have the qualifications to pass judgment or to know better. As long as I'm in the active learning phase of my journey, I must be humble and I must be kind. And ask questions, form loose conclusions that don't settle like stone in my mind, tripping up other bits of information that might change what I think. Fluidity in our thoughts is maintained through constant learning, and fluidity in our thoughts keeps our consciousness open to greater connection. That matters for hopefully obvious reasons. When someone poses a different opinion from you, introduces new facts to you, looks different from you, talks different from you, comes from a different place, a different culture, a different background, the more fluid you can be in your mind, the more likely you will be able to make a connection that expands your knowledge and expands your understanding. You'll be much less likely to mock the other if you are connected to it. We are all human beings. We have that single greatest evolutionary trait in common, and through it we are connected. That makes us responsible for one another. So when we think about where our responsibilities lie when it comes to feeling, knowing, and truly understanding, it is in buoying up other people, not pushing them down. It is in feeling what they feel through empathetic listening, knowing what they know through constant learning, and claiming that we truly understand only when we have immersed ourselves in the trials and triumphs of the other. When that happens, chances are we might no longer wish to mock something that we do understand. For my part, I'm now of the mind that I would love to meet any one of those chicken owners that were featured in the documentary. Not only were their stories fascinating, but in the end, I really do love chickens. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, I wish you safe travels.